So I'd like to start with how you got involved in climate activism. So when did your passion for climate change begin?
Yeah, it began, I guess, around when I was 18 in second year university. And I started taking a lot of classes that year on international development and international politics. And that was sort of when I understood our global system for the first time, and saw how so many issues are interconnected, and how at the end of the day, climate change and the sort of related issues are going to affect every single person on this planet. So that is why I became very passionate about it, because I always knew I wanted to do something that helps people. And this is going to affect every person on Earth. So that is where my passion began, and I haven't looked back ever since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally relate. Like I'm taking a global studies program right now, actually, for my undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
So, every single class, there's a lecture about like how climate change affects this one particular topic. So
Mm-hmm.
it's so like, I guess, connected to every single thing
Mm-hmm.
that we
100%.
Yeah, and I know for me especially, school has kind of even worsened my climate anxiety a little
Yeah,
bit.
I think so too. I mean, I also, yeah, I ended up in that program, international development, and it was environment focused. And most of the program is like, what is wrong with our system? It teaches you that critical thinking, but it really doesn't teach you practical solutions. So that is also kind of like where activism comes into play, because activism, act is in the word. So it's all driven by action, which I guess is like the complementing thing for once you understand this problem. It's like, okay, what can we do? And you don't really
Mhm,
learn that in school. So I guess you have to turn to the activists.
for sure.
Yeah.
So when did you decide to focus on the more activist side of the climate movement?
Yeah, like I just said before, it was kind of like as soon as I understood this, I was like, how is everybody not talking about this? How is everybody not active on this, when I really internalized like the real reality that we're facing with like 11 years left before this is irreversible. And so yeah, it was basically immediately. And at first sort of driven by that idea, like if everyone understood, they would do something too. I started with a lot of like sort of just spreading awareness, like even on Instagram, talking about it, and stuff like that. And that was how my activism started. And then it changed into trying to make more information about this accessible. So I had like a website and stuff with all this stuff about climate action and solutions. And now I have moved over like increasingly towards more and more action oriented and justice oriented action. So I've been working for like different NGOs and doing a lot of work with like the youth climate movement, and mobilizing young people. And I have been working within politics in that capacity in the past few years too, just trying to mobilize young voters, and stuff like that too. So yeah, I guess in some, increasingly moving toward from raising awareness towards action, because raising awareness is not enough.
hmm Yeah, it's really interesting how you mentioned like using Instagram as well, because I think that's a very new tool in terms
Mm-hmm.
of social action. And I
Mm-hmm.
also know like with like the Black Lives Matter movement going on right now, a lot of stuff is being broadcasted through TikTok as well, which I think is just like the coolest thing.
Yeah.
Being able to mobilize young people through, this facet that every young person knows about. It's just really cool how
Mm-hmm.
that can be like a tool for good as well, instead
Mm-hmm.
of just like the memes.
For sure, for sure. I mean, I guess it's like sort of a double-edged sword, because like there's good and bad things about online activism. Like it is really good for spreading ideas fast, but the problem with a lot of people's activism is that it ends after they shared that one post. And so they did that and they say, okay, I feel good, I did my bit, but the reality is that we have to do so much more. And usually it requires making some sort of sacrifice, whether that's your money or your time. And that's what a lot of people aren't necessarily willing into their face. So that's what I try to do, is make like free, inclusive.
For sure. So you're very outspoken about the importance of politics and voting, as you were mentioning earlier. So for you, why is voting so important in relation to the climate crisis?
For sure. I think it's like important to sort of look at the big picture of the climate crisis, and we know that 70% of global emissions are caused by just 10 of the biggest companies in the world. So when we really like sit on that fact, it means that if every single person reduced their footprint by 100%, we would still have 70% of the problem. So the problem really is these big businesses. However, what these businesses are doing right now, we do make them the enemy often, and we say they're the bad guys, but what they're doing is 100% legal. All of the extraction for profits and everything, like there's no laws against that. And there's very, very few regulations actually putting checks on these biggest polluters. So that is why I think government is so important. Because the businesses are not just going to change on their own, or else they already would have. We need laws on these issues coming from the top, and we also need regulation to make sure that this transition is just. We can't just leave it to the businesses and hope that they make the right decisions. History has shown us that doesn't really work, so we really do need to be intentional about the policies that we create. And yeah, that is why voting is so important, I guess, just given the time frame that we have to solve climate change. That's like, one more term of leadership, really, that we have to take action. So we really need strong leaders in government. And that is also why I have been working for the Green Party for the past year, because they're the only real party in Canada with a real climate plan that's based on science and who prioritize the environment over profits. So yeah, that's like, I guess, the big picture.
Yeah, and like I know a ton of young people, like myself included, especially in Canada, feel that, the two main parties will never put the best interest of the planet like over money.
Right.
So it's like so hard to, vote, because like you don't want the conservatives in there if you're like a leftist, but you want to vote for the Green Party because they have, but that like
they're limited.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
it's tough.
Yeah. That was like a really big thing that came up when I was like working in the federal election in the fall, that so many people want to like strategically vote to not have the conservatives in power. But the problem is that completely defeats the purpose of democracy, because if everyone is saying, oh, I guess we just have to vote liberals just to not have the conservatives, nobody's voting with their values, and they're not going to be happy with the results if the liberals stay in power. And if everyone actually voted with their values, all those people who are scared to vote Green or NDP actually did, there would be a huge, huge difference in the results that we saw. So we really have been encouraging people to vote with their values. And I mean, why I'm working now for Miriam Haddad, who's running to become the next leader of the Green Party, is because she is young, she's progressive, she is representative of young people. And we need somebody like that who can excite young people and bring them in, and actually give the Green Party a chance of like being a real strong voice in government. So because clearly they haven't been able to do that, and they haven't been able to attract young progressives because the Green Party hasn't been progressive enough. So that's what I'm working on now, and Miriam is amazing, and the election is coming up in the beginning of October. So it's like the final little stretch of our campaign, but we've gained like tons of support from like the young leftists, ecosocialists, everybody, a lot of people joining forces. So we'll see what happens, but
yeah,
fingers
crossed. So we often see that like, unfortunately, a lot of young people don't vote, but we have seen that like young people can be super engaged in politics and social issues, like we've seen with the climate strike, the Black Lives Matter movement. Why do you think, there's such a low young voter turnout?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is getting better, I guess. It is getting better slowly, but not fast enough. And that's also like, I think it's so frustrating as people working as change makers in this. Like, for example, you go to these climate strikes, you see 150,000 people show up in the streets, and you just imagine what would happen if all of those people voted green. Then the demands that we're standing up for in the streets for decarbonizing our economies, prioritizing Indigenous lives, defunding the police, like all of that would actually get translated into policy if all of these people showed up to vote. So we're really pushing, and same in the States. Like I follow tons of activists, and it seems as though like everyone is really trying their hardest to mobilize voters, and we'll see how things turn out. But yeah, I mean, it could be. I feel as though we are going increasingly more politicized young people, and 2020 sort of feels like a year where a lot of like systemic crises are coming to the surface, and that is activating a lot of people. So it's just about now translating all these newly activated people into voters. And we'll see if that happens. Yeah, working our hardest to do it, and I feel very encouraged by like what's happening within the Green Party election. It's not all of Canada, it's not America, whatever, but we have in the past few months, when we began the leadership contest or election race, whatever, there was just over 20,000 members of the Green Party, and now we have 35,000 members. So almost doubled in size, and a lot of those are young progressives. So if they actually show up to vote for the leadership race, we might have a really cool young new progressive leader of the Green Party, which hopefully will lead to a big shift in the political landscape of Canada. So fingers crossed. Hope everybody shows up.
Yeah, for sure. So you, as you said, you're working to support Miriam Haddad, who is running to be the leader of the Green Party, and she describes herself as an eco-socialist. So what is an eco-socialist?
Great question. So we have sort of like branded our eco-socialist movement as the watermelon revolution is what we're calling it, because the watermelon is green and red, and that's what eco-socialism is about: green for the world and red for the people. And fundamentally, the reason for this like sort of eco-socialist upsurgence, I guess, is that eco-socialists believe that capitalism is the root problem behind environmental degradation and social inequality, because it puts profit over the planet and over people. So if that's always the bottom line, if the profit's always going to come first, we're never going to be able to solve the climate crises as well as social inequality under this system. So the alternative is eco-socialism, which puts the planet and the people before profit. And Miriam is a declared eco-socialist since the day she began her campaign, and that has actually resonated with so many people. And this sort of links back to the question you asked before about why young people are not voting. And a big reason is because there's no leaders that have the same values as us right now on the national stage. And it's very rare to see a politician come out and say, I'm a socialist, or I'm an eco-socialist, which is even more radical, you could say. But Miriam, we need somebody who is far on the left to actually push ideas forward. As we've seen with like AOC in the States. And with all big change makers in the past, you need to have very bold, very progressive and uncompromising positions on things if you're ever going to push things forward. Versus some of the other candidates running, and a leader like Elizabeth May branded the party as sort of centrist. And you're never going to get a big push for strong environmental policies in the center. You're just not. So eco-socialism is as big of a change as, you know, the crisis that we're facing, and it is really resonating with a lot of people. And we're actually having like this huge convention on the watermelon revolution this Sunday, if you're interested in joining.
Ooh.
Yeah,
maybe you could send me the info.
I don't know
for
if you have
that.
any further questions. Yes, I will for sure. Yeah, our main topics, which like sort of fall under our eco-socialist perspective, are decolonization and land back, green jobs, abolishing the police, and a united coalition on the left. So those are
Oh.
some of the big goals of our movement here. And it's all connected, sort of linking like taking care of the people and the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question or if you have
Yeah,
more
that's awesome.
questions about it. Okay, cool.
So do you believe that voting for the Green Party is a major solution to climate change? And additionally, like, would you think that other nations would have to kind of do the same and like
100%. It definitely is big. Oh, sorry, you just cut out a second there,
oh
Avery.
no.
Sorry, you said, is this the solution and what other nations?
Oh yeah, would other nations like have to follow in the same footsteps, like electing very progressive, environmentally focused governments?
I mean, I think more than ever we need strong leadership on these topics. And the movement has been growing a lot in terms of like the climate strikes and the people who are active on this. But again, we're not seeing that translated into policy changes from the top down. So yeah, voting is a big thing that people can do, but that's not everything. It's a piece of the puzzle, but you also, have to show up to protests, and we have to support other movements as well. Like the Green Party is about the climate, but it's also about climate justice. So it's also about decolonization and racial justice. And like we said, all of these issues stem back to the same system. So it is about solidarity within other social groups in Canada and around the world. We can't say like everyone just has to do this exact same thing and vote in green leaders. Yes, we need green leaders, but we need progressive leaders on all of these social issues, and we all need to work together because that's the only way that we will succeed. The way I see it, we are very much all stronger when we work together. So we have to help each other out and uplift all of the people who are on the front lines of this work, especially throughout this work. But yeah, voting is a very simple and easy way for us to make a big difference if we all show up and vote with our values.
Yeah, I feel like people fail to realize, like people who don't vote, they just fail to realize how simple and fast it is. Like I remember during the federal election, it took me like 5 minutes at my school.
I
And
know.
I stopped between classes and I did it, and it was literally the easiest thing ever.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I mean, there have been a lot of people who have been working to make it more accessible, voting, and make it easier and stuff. So hopefully we'll continue with that. But yeah, one step at a time. And I mean, we can vote in federal elections, but also something like this leadership race, which is what we're working on now, is really cool because, we often hear people say, oh, I'm so fed up with politicians. I wish we had somebody like AOC in this country. I wish we had strong leadership. And then we have the leadership race right now is an opportunity for people to choose who's going to lead a party in our country. So even if you don't plan on voting green in the election, you can still participate in this leadership race and have a say in who becomes one of the most prominent new leaders in our government.
Okay, so as you mentioned already, many other social issues are tied to climate change. So what is the importance of intersectionalism in the fight against climate change?
Sure. Yeah, it's a big question. And this is like intersectionality and sort of like taking this lens to climate action has been something that I'm constantly learning and working on throughout my work, always trying to become more and more intersectional. And I think a lot of climate activists, including myself, start off in this work as, oh, this is just about the environment, the planet is dying. But we have to see the environmental degradation as not the root problem itself, but it's a symptom of the bigger problem, which is, like we said before, capitalism. It's our global system that says that we should exploit the planet at all costs for as much profit as possible, and we should consume as much as possible, and we should exploit workers along the way and whatever it takes for profit. So that is the real problem, and we will never solve climate change if we don't look at the root problem that's incentivizing companies and people to destroy the planet. And when we look at the sort of bigger system, we can see how climate change is connected to other social issues. For example, Indigenous rights is inherently connected to climate change because it's Indigenous land that is being destroyed by these companies for their next development project. And it is women who are disproportionately impacted by climate change. And it is poor people of color in the global south who are most affected by the impacts of climate change and the natural disasters. So that is a really big paradox that is often overlooked by the sort of like white savior kind of environmentalists, who may be well-meaning and maybe don't even understand how they're contributing to sort of a problem in a way, but sort of like the main, I forget what they call it, the grand paradox of global warming is that and climate change, is the people who contribute to it the most who are affected the least, like rich people in developed northern countries who have a large benefit from upholding the status quo and keeping their money and keeping their big companies running as they are. But it is the people who contribute to climate change the least who are affected the most. So that is Black, Indigenous, people of color, mostly in the global South, but also in the global North too. It's still Indigenous people, it's still racialized communities that are most impacted. So that is why we need to take like a justice lens to our approach to climate activism and make sure that we are putting these marginalized voices at the forefront of our work and designing our policies based around the most marginalized people and making sure that they don't get left behind in this transition.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another side note sort of to add to that, which I think is really important, is that, you know, people are like, oh, we're working towards justice, we're working towards a green economy. But you can work towards justice, that is great, but you have to make sure that you are using justice in your entire approach to get there. Because if you're just trying to have renewable energy, but you're still going to go onto Indigenous land without consent and destroy their land, in the process of that, you're not working towards justice. So it has to be the end goal and the approach that you take to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great point. So you are living in Vancouver, so you're experiencing the after effects of, or I guess the effects of the California and Oregon wildfires, which, you know, are getting worse every single year, and we're seeing more and more hurricanes and flooding all across the world. So do you have any words for the people who maybe deny climate change or believe that it isn't already happening and we aren't already seeing the effects?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to get into like really heated discussions with people about this, like, and my name on Instagram, that sustainability girl, is because people would come up to me at parties and be like, oh, you're that sustainability girl, because I was always posting about it. Like, people knew me as that person, so they'd always come up to me and have discussions about this. And especially people like who don't believe in it, like, love to pick a fight about this.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I have like realized over the years, like, for me personally, it's not worth my time or energy. Most of these people will never change their minds and don't want to have their mind changed. They just want to fight. And the reality is that 98% of, well, I guess it's 90% of scientists in the world, but the percentage of people who actually deny climate change is very small. Those people just speak extremely loudly. But in reality, most people either believe in climate change and aren't active on it, or believe in it and would like to take action but don't know how. So the way I see it, that's a much better way to spend my time, is engaging with those people and helping to give them the tools to get involved with activism and to connect them to people, etc., to get them going on activism, rather than trying to convince those really small percentage of people to change their minds. So that's just me. But I mean, of course, I do think it's important to be able to have open discussions with people, and to believe that people can change their minds. Because if we don't ever give people the opportunity to change or to improve themselves, they will not. But that doesn't mean that we should get, you know, too wrapped up in spending our whole life trying to fight those people, when we can just be working with our brothers and sisters who are fighting for the same things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and my last question for you is, what do you think is the best way for somebody to maybe get involved in the climate movement if they have never been a part of it before?
For sure. Well, it's an interesting question because, like, if you look at sort of pop culture, the mass understanding of climate change, or most of what you read about, it's often encouraging people to recycle or eat less meat or um, buy secondhand clothing and stuff like that. And that stuff is important. Our individual actions are important. But like we said before, 70% of global emissions come from 10 of the biggest companies. So it is about changing the system is more important, honestly, than our individual actions to reduce our footprint. So changing the system, like individual actions, like I said, is eating less meat, like your clothing, etc., and changing the system is voting, is showing up to protests, is signing petitions, which are actually super duper effective against these big companies, and for protecting land and standing in solidarity with Indigenous people who are protecting land and who've been advocating for this for forever, really. Those are the things that are most important if we want to see the large scale change that we need to solve this crisis, because our individual actions will not be enough. But I mean, you don't hear that enough because, you know, big companies and those who are in control of the status quo and want to uphold the status quo don't want people thinking about the system and changing the system because their interests lie in upholding things the way that they are. So you do sort of have to turn the to the activists, I guess, to the people who are really taking strong stances on these issues, because the ones in the center are the status quo, and that's just going to lead us to extinction. So,
Hmm. Well,
mhm.
those are all the questions I have for you. Thank you
Okay,
again for speaking with me. I will share the completed post with you once it's been finalized. It'll probably be 2 weeks, maybe. I have
okay,
some other ones to catch up on, but should be
sounds
coming soon.
okay, cool. And I have a question, like, so I'm wondering just like about your organization, or like what, like, is it how big it is and what other stuff you're working on?
Yeah, so it's very much like a startup. We're actually having our beta launch in the next few weeks.
Hmm.
It's basically a platform that seeks to connect eco-minded people with projects in their area or ways to get involved.
Cool.
So it's almost like a social media for, you know, eco-minded people.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can like get badges and rewards on your profile and stuff like that. So yeah, we are just focusing on this blog series right now. It's what I'm focusing on, just to, you know, gain hype and stuff like that. But it is a very small organization so
Hmm.
far. I think I'm one of the interns. I think there's two other interns. We have our founder and then a few of the behind the scenes people, and that's pretty much it.
Hmm.
So it's been a lot of hard work trying to get this launch going, but
Hmm. Hmm.
hopefully,
Yeah, I feel that. I've worked for like small organizations and projects too. And I mean, even if they're not influencing things on the big scheme, like sometimes in a small organization or a small community that you cultivate online, you can actually make a lot of change in those individuals, people's lives, you know, and like really engage with the community and stuff like that. And I had a similar sort of project a few years ago called For Life with my friend. It was actually that website I mentioned that about like climate solutions and stuff. It started from this, and we were trying to unite activists into a community, and it was actually really successful. Like we had like around 30 activists or so in our community, and what we would do was like share our projects we were working on with each other and cross promote each other and ask each other for advice and stuff like that. And it was really helpful. And so I think like having a network and working with like-minded people is like a beautiful and really important thing. And if I can ever help you guys, like really let me know. I have like a lot of connections in this world because I've been working in it for a few years, and most of my work has been about connecting people. So I really like, if there's any way I can help, definitely let me know.
oh, thank you so much. That's really kind of you.
No, my pleasure. I mean it for sure.
Yeah,
So
I feel like one of the main things about like this blog series has been like creating the networks, like not just that, but you know, like learning from each other and stuff too. So
mhm.
it's been a really cool journey. Yeah.
And like I think it's important too to like build relationships too, especially like because like a lot of us are doing this work unpaid, you know, like we need each other's help for projects to be successful. So I guess that's like something I would like think about when you're like doing all these interviews, is like ways that you can maintain relationships with all these people and see how you can help each other in the future, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone working in this wants the same thing. So I think people are often really willing to help each other, which is great.
Mm-hmm. It is. Well,
Mhm.
I'll let you go. Thank you again.
My
It was
pleasure.
really, really interesting listening to your insights. So thank you
Uh,
for sharing them with me.
my pleasure. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions or you need me to
Yeah, of
clarify things.
course.
I don't know. I feel like I kind of like blabbered, so I'm sorry
No,
if my
it's okay. Don't worry.
answers were too long or like unquotable, but you can like paraphrase or cut my words or whatever you need to do. Feel free to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your
Thank,
day.
thank you, Avery. Thanks for your work on
Yeah.
this.
Oh,
I
it was
love
nice to meet
dialogue.
you.
Nice to meet you too. Feel free to get in touch anytime.
Okay. Thank you so
All right,
much.
cheers.
Bye.